Welcome back all. In this episode we're going to have a brief discussion about what is neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is basically the scientific fact that no two brains are identical, that there is diversity between all brains, and Nick Walker describes neurodiversity as, I quote, "Neurodiversity is an essential form of human diversity. The idea that there is one normal or healthy type of brain or mind, or one right style of neurocognitive functioning, is no more valid than the idea that there is one normal or right gender, race, or culture. The classification of neurodivergence as medical psychiatric pathology has no valid scientific basis, and instead reflects cultural prejudice and oppresses those labelled as such. The social dynamics around neurodiversity are similar to other forms of human diversity. These dynamics include unequal distribution of social power. Conversely, when embraced, diversity can act as a source of creative potential." Close quote. What we need to mainly focus on there is where he says cultural prejudices. When we look at all the different types of minds, such as neurodivergent, where neurodivergent is an adjective that describes a person with a brain that functions in a way less related to the majority. Another term you'll come across is neurotypical, which is basically the opposite of neurodivergent, an adjective which describes a brain which functions in a more related way to the majority. And what we can see between this neurodivergent and neurotypical is it's actually a dichotomy, where just thinking that there's billions of people in the world but there's only two types of brains, something seems odd about that. And then when we look at the pathology paradigm, we also come to see that there's typical brains and atypical brains. So once again we've got this polarisation, and one of the most common places we see polarisation is in politics altogether, and the neurodiversity movement is a political movement for social justice. So we're beginning to see something political here. What we come to find is back when Francis Galton created a one-size-fits-all kind of idea, what he did was they selected behaviours which they found socially desirable, and they investigated the ones who were not very socially desirable according to their judgment. So all the way from the beginning, from the 19th century, what is socially desirable is actually an opinion and a point of view. But science is not supposed to be based on points of views or opinions. So all the way from the beginning, as where Nick Walker said there's no valid scientific basis, since it's actually a violation of science, the method of it, it is indeed, there is no valid basis to claim that autistic people, ADHD, Down syndrome, that there's no valid reason to claim there's something wrong about those brains. So pathology today is more political, and this can be demonstrated throughout what's called the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. What we found is that in 1952, on the first edition, homosexuality was seen as a pathological disorder, and we know that back in the time of the Nazis, all homosexual people were being terminated. They were seen as socially undesirable. They were. So, but was it ever actually a pathological disorder? Since homosexuality was able to be changed by opinion, that once again shows that this is not about trying to gain an objective understanding about humanity, showing that this is social injustice. And what they've been trying to do with research, as we've seen them do with Down syndrome, is that they've been using abortion as an eugenics tool to try and eliminate individuals and disallow that fetuses who test positive with Down syndrome to be brought into our world. But they justify this form of genocide by claiming that people with Down syndrome are a financial burden upon our health services and society. Claim that they cost so much altogether. I would just like to challenge this justification of the health services. Approximately 0.1% of fetuses test positive as a fetus with Down syndrome. So that means 99.9% of money spent on prenatal testing and screening was actually spent for nothing. And now, as a simple mathematical equation, wouldn't that 99.9% of money actually exceed the amount of money it would cost to support a person with Down syndrome if we welcome them into our world? I would say it certainly would. So in this case, trying to eradicate disabilities, neurodivergent minds, actually comes to show that society's desire is actually its own financial burden. It's not disabilities that are a financial burden. There's no valid scientific basis to this. And now I'm going to briefly talk about something which is the neurodiversity paradigm. The neurodiversity paradigm is more of a belief system that all forms of human neurological development are equally valid and equally valuable. That they are. And this is not based on social desires, it's not based on opinions or anything, so we can actually say that neurodiversity actually does follow the principles and rules of science. And there's another subject called scientism. And in scientism, I argue that it's not just an over-enthusiastic view, but scientism can be used strategically as a tool to shape public opinion. And since what's seen as psychiatric in the world today is all determined by what is socially desirable, we actually can see who's disabled and who's not is determined by society. It is not determined by natural science. So I would say this greatly challenges and makes us need to have a paradigm shift together if we wish to have a valid scientific basis to all these claims that the medical model makes. Now, out of all these different brains, different kinds of minds from ADHD, Down syndrome, autism, they all provide abilities that do not exist inside neurotypical minds. So not only do disabilities manifest shortcomings and difficulties, but they also manifest strengths and abilities. So why should these abilities be seen as invaluable? Why exactly? Yes, really you can't validly go claiming that disabled people are inferior and non-disabled people are not inferior just because disabled people have different needs, not they have more needs. The needs are just different simply due to natural variation in their neurological development. So altogether this whole thing of pathology today is no longer defined in terms of pathology, but it's defined in terms of normality And since normality is subjective, that shows that it's directly oppositional to science. And I would like you to ask yourselves, would you like a government that has the least perceptions, the least ideas, the least diverse set of skills, the least diverse abilities? Would you like a world where everyone is identical, which will make our world so boring? Is that really what you want? The neurodiversity paradigm is our only hope against combating against this genocide, against giving authority to those behind CRISPR who think that they should eliminate all of these genes which have been associated with disabilities. Now, who is it up to decide whether a person is worthy of life or not? I'll let you decide there. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. See you on the next episode.